Hello, everybody, and welcome to June's virtual speech webinar, where today we'll be looking at lessons learned from the world's largest XR initiative. So thank you for joining us today. I'm Sophie Thompson, co-founder and CEO of Virtual Speech, the leading provider of VR soft skills training. We use VR and AI-powered role plays to improve skills by 25% in just 10 minutes. We want this webinar to be interactive, so please feel free to drop your comments and questions on whichever platform you're watching us from, and I'll make sure that we ask our guests. And today we have a panel of people who have each played a role in this global initiative where 690 schools across Belgium are now using virtual reality for learning. So Louise, you led this project, so could you introduce yourself first, and then we'll move to Jordan and Rob.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. I'm Louise. I am a consultant at RTC Antwerpen. We are an organization within the Department of Education here in Flanders. And basically what we do is we try to bridge the gap between the industry, the labor market, and education. And we do this by hosting a lot of projects and initiatives, which the XR action plan that we will discuss today is one of. But we have a lot of other things going, mainly focused on training students, but also teachers, and to professionalize them and prepare them better for their future careers, future education, and to make sure that they are up to speed with what's going on in the labor market, as that is sometimes difficult for schools to follow up with everything new and technology and innovation. It goes so quickly. So that's why we as RTC Antwerp try to provide support and train them in doing all that.
Great, thank you. Jordan.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Jordan, one of the co-founders of ArborXR. I lead the revenue and sales and success teams here at Arbor. I've been working with Louise now for, gosh, we've been talking for almost 2 years, it feels like, as this has been slowly ramping up. But excited to be here, excited to share our journey and our perspective on this whole initiative.
Great, thank you. Rob.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Rob. I work at Pico, one of the biggest XR and VR headset manufacturers in the world. And I'm on the enterprise side, where I oversee basically the collaboration with our partners, which can be software companies like yours, Sophie, or clients like you, Louise, or also other partners like Jordan's MDM solutions. And I'm here to help people grow and create successful projects fast and easy and scalable.
Amazing, thank you. So just before we begin, thanks to the generosity of Rob and the team at Pico, we will be holding a giveaway today where you could win a Pico Neo 3 Pro. So to enter, simply enter #XR education in the comments section, and we'll pick a winner at random at the end. Okay, on to the discussion. So to get everybody warmed up a bit, let's do a quick round of what was your first experience in VR, or when did you realise the impact VR could have? So Jordan, I'll come to you first there.
You say Jordan?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Happy to take it. So I put on a VR headset for the first time about 8 years ago. And at the time, the use case was all about B2C and gaming, and everyone thought it was going to be the next gaming platform. And I still think some people think that, and who knows, we'll see. But either way, we just tried on simple things like Zombie Training Simulator or Arizona Sunshine, if anybody remembers these games from way back. And it was clear to us, even just playing these games, like, wow, this technology is unbelievable. It's got to be the next big thing. And so that was it for us. We took that experience and started up a VR arcade at the time, and we've transformed a lot since then, of course. But yeah, that was it for me, just putting on the headset.
Somebody has commented, yes, love Arizona Sunshine.
Yeah,
so
me too.
You're not alone there. Thank you. Rob, what was your first experience?
Probably at the same time. So in 2015, I had just moved from Chile to the UK, and I was working with neuroscience and behavioral research. And we were the first company to glue an eye tracker into a VR headset and use that for academic and commercial research. And we found that the behavior, the visual attention, cognitive effort, learning in virtual reality are actually very similar to what we've found previously in the real world with the research. So virtual reality became like super interesting for our research perspective. And at the same time, the amazing thing about virtual reality is that you can do and show things which in the real world are basically impossible, or they are very dangerous or expensive. So this was basically when it clicked, and I thought, wow, this has like a profound impact, let's say, on the way we learn and or the way we teach as well, the way we can train professionals, the way we can design things, and also the way we can actually work and treat patients in healthcare, for example. So I got basically hooked up on the infinite possibilities to change and hopefully also improve the world with this technology. But I didn't start from this consumer perspective. I started directly from this professional entry point, let's say.
Cool, thank you. And we've actually had a comment from Zane saying that they can vouch for you and that you are very passionate and enthusiastic about promoting immersive education. So thank you, Zane. Louise, what was your first experience?
Well, very similar to Rob, actually. It was when I just first started working at RTC. I think I was working for RTC a couple of days when I joined one of my colleagues who visited a Belgian software developer called One Bonsai, and they have a fire extinguishing training. Never done VR before, never extinguished a fire before. So I was quite nervous to try on the headset because I had no idea what I was doing. But the training was so well made, and it guided me through it, and I proceeded to succeed in just a couple of seconds. And that really made me realize the possibilities of what VR can do for training and education. And just like Rob said, it has so much potential to do dangerous things, to do things that are difficult for schools to do in real life. And I keep using the example of the fire extinguishing training also whenever that I introduce VR with our teachers, because it's a very simple training, but it's quite impressive for a lot of people to see a fire from so close. And it's a great way to show the potential of VR. And as Rob said, there's so many content available for training, and it's really impressive what's possible now.
Wow, that's a brilliant first time to use VR. I think the first time I used it, it was like, I have no idea what it even was. It was that long ago, and it was like really static. And I just remember putting on a headset and looking down, and I had like really hairy like man arms and man hands, and I was like, "What's going on here?" So that was my first time. That was back on the Samsung Gear VR, if anybody remembers that. Great, thanks everybody. So Louise, let's start by going back to the beginning of this project. So how did it come about?
Well, we started preparing and thinking it out a few years ago. I think it's about 3 years ago that the idea came up of, we were aware of the benefits of XR for training and education. So we started thinking about how can we do this in a structured way for the whole education system in Flanders. COVID accelerated things, of course, because it was very difficult at that time for teachers, but also for students to train certain procedures or things that they needed machines for. It was very difficult to do from home. So the Flemish government, the Department of Education, they decided to invest in an XR action plan, which is unique in the world. They decided to invest in multiple things, starting from hardware, software, training, all these things, which are important, of course, to implement XR in a structured way in the education system. Because before we saw that some schools were purchasing headsets, but they didn't really know what they were doing. They all ran into the same problems, the same issues, and there was just no structure. So the government decided to step in, and we made it possible to purchase over 1,000 headsets that are used in almost 700 schools, which is quite impressive. And we're also providing training, we're providing software, because the hardware is nice, but you also need software, you need a way to manage things. And we did research for about 2 years, and we finally started implementing the project last September.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And yeah, just the scale of it is phenomenal. So you mentioned hardware. So let's talk about hardware first. So there's a few standout providers on the market, and we certainly find with our customers that sometimes it can be quite overwhelming to decide which headset is the best for your specific needs. So what were your requirements there?
Well, it was for us. It was just the same as for every customer or everyone that wants to start VR. There's so much on the market, and it's very difficult to decide what suits your needs best. But in our case, we had to go to a European tendering procedure. So we wrote out criteria. We spoke to a lot of people to know what was important for our schools. And then we started the tendering procedure, and Pico came out as the best one. And we're very happy with the results from the tender. But yeah, there's a lot of things that you need to think about. You need a qualitative headset that is well supported. There's one of the most important things for us as well was that it was a standalone device, because we are using our devices in a rotation system, so they go from school to school. So therefore, it's important to have a standalone device that needs no external equipment to make the rotation possible, and to make it easy to use and user-friendly for our schools, of course. But a second thing that was really important for us was privacy, and Pico stands out there as well. You can't have a device in a school that records everything and uses everything for commercial purposes, as some other devices on the market do. So that was a big criterion for us as well.
Mm-hmm. And Rob, could you speak a bit more to the privacy of the Pico headsets?
Yeah, sure. The privacy is a very important topic for us. And I think it all starts that basically at Pico, we have two largely independent areas. So we have the consumer area and the enterprise area. And they are independent, as I mentioned, and they have also very different ways to work, because just the needs and wants of the respective users or clients are also very different in general. So in the enterprise area where I work, the education topic is one of our major focus areas, and we take it very seriously. And it's good. We have been able to provide a lot of headsets to most of the major education tenders in Europe. And I think one of the main things that we do different is that we actually build different headsets for this enterprise area. So sorry for taking up a little bit of a workaround here, but just to get you a better understanding how we enable this whole privacy, it starts by building dedicated devices. Basically, they have their own operating system and their own interface and useful functionalities for companies, hospitals, and schools. And we don't take the consumer devices and just throw them into schools, for example. So that would cause all kind of challenges. And if we are looking at the privacy topic, but also from a more general perspective, we are trying to make it as easy as possible for people, for companies to use these headsets, right? So, and if you want to deploy tens of headsets, hundreds of headsets, or even thousands of headsets there in a public environment, there are a couple of challenges. And let's start with the first, for example, that's internet, just basically availability of internet. So that's where we start. Our headsets, for example, they don't need internet. They never need to go online. So there isn't any kind of communication if you don't want to. And if an app or a software like Jordan's MDM solutions, if they need internet connection to manage them, then you still don't need any accounts. Why would you? I mean, that would take ages to set up. And so you don't need to have any accounts, simple as that. And for some things, you can still use an account on our headsets for our classroom management solution, for example. and you need just a basic authentication. And that means we need some sort of an account, but those accounts are usually made for companies. So you basically have one single account for the whole institution if you want to have one. And this account has no sensible data, no private data. And with this, we kind of kill two birds with one stone. On the one hand, we make it super easy to use the headsets, super scalable, super fast to use the headsets. And on the other hand, there isn't any personal data that could be used or seen at all. So that's how we do it.
Yeah, and I think they're good USPs, definitely, and shows your experience with scaling VR as well across particularly Europe. I know we're very concerned about those kinds of things.
Absolutely.
So Louise, in terms of software, what did you find that teachers were looking for?
Well, teachers need context-bound software. And by that, I mean they need software that is directly suitable for their course. It makes no sense for a teacher in languages, for example, to use a welding simulator. It's a nice thing to show, but it makes no sense for them to teach with that. So they need something like virtual speech, for example, that is directly applicable to their course, to their subject. And we try to, and I think we succeeded in that as well, to provide something that is directly suitable for every teacher in every course and every subject. That's really necessary to get them to use extended reality, because we need to convince them with something that speaks to them. And software-wise, it was a big puzzle for us. We started researching software about 3 years ago too. We're still researching software right now. We're still expanding. We're still learning. We're still exploring new developers, new applications, and I'm very happy with the help of Rob there as well, who introduces me to a lot of their partners too. But yeah, it's just important that you have something that directly speaks to the teacher. And I'm glad that we were able to find something and to test it out and to approve something that is suitable for every teacher in every school.
Mm-hmm. And what sort of learning apps or learning experiences do you have available to them?
It's all available on our website too, so teachers are able to navigate to see what's useful for them. But I think that we have multiple trainings. Working at heights for construction. We have virtual speech for languages, Futu class for chemistry. So we have something for everyone, and we're still open to suggestions too. Sometimes teachers are very excited and they start researching themselves. And we always try to see what's possible. But for us, it's also important that it's something that is directly related to the learning goals here in Flanders as well. So we try to evaluate every software on that as well.
Mm-hmm. And during this whole process of trying to get everything together, what are some of the barriers that you faced when trying to launch?
It's a very unique project, so we couldn't really find an example to start from. So we all had to build it up from the ground up, and it was very difficult at times because we had to research everything ourselves. We had to test out everything ourselves. We've been doing that for 3 years. We're only live for about a year, so it takes a lot of work. But that's something that we also want to support the schools with, because schools were doing the same things. They were all doing it separately, and now we have from the government, we have an organization like RTC Antwerpen who has been doing that for them, so that they don't have to face the same struggles as we did. It was very difficult to organize everything, from the tendering procedures to how that we can structure the hardware to divide it within the schools, the purchase of software, MDM solutions. So we're very happy that we found some partners that were able to assist us there as well. And 3 of them, I'm very happy to have them here as well.
Yeah, I think it's amazing what you've achieved, Louise. So you've got your hardware, you've got your software, but rolling that out to over 1,000 headsets is no easy feat. So I know that many of our customers use MDMs like Arbor, and you mentioned that you use Arbor as well. So how do you use Arbor specifically? And then we'll come to Jordan and ask you some more specifics.
Well, it was a very complex process to think out, because as you mentioned, we have over 1,000 devices that are used in about 700 locations. So it was very difficult to think how we were going to do that, but we were able to come up with an efficient system, I think. So basically how the rollout of the devices works is we have school communities. Every school is a part of a community, and we distribute it to hardware to the communities. So they are able to rotate between the schools. And then in Arbor, we decided to create an organization for each community, because we think that it's important for schools to have access to Arbor as well, because it gives them some opportunities. They can look at the content library, they can cast the devices, things like that. So for us, it was really necessary to give them access as well, but a limited access, of course, because we're facing security risks, privacy issues. So we really had to think it through, and we ended up creating an organization in ArborXR for each school community. So that way we could give the users limited access to do the things that we want them to do and the things that we think are necessary. But mostly from the RTC, we're managing the devices, so we upload new content, we follow up updates of the operation system, things like that. But schools also have access, because we thought that that was important to give them the freedom to do certain things themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jordan, Louise has alluded to some of the reasons people might come to you. But what are some of the common challenges that your customers come to you for help with?
Yeah, well, especially in education, one of the primary things is just being able to lock down what I call the in-headset experience. So when a student puts on the device, how do we make sure they're not getting access to the store or the browser specifically, or just certain settings and configurations, being able to factory reset the headset? We want to be able to lock down that for Louise and her students. So when those students put on the device, they're only seeing the applications that Louise wants that student to have access to. So in education, that's certainly one of the primary things. But Louise mentioned, of course, the just general device management, being able to see the status and health of devices, where devices are actually located physically in the world, and then being able to, of course, push and update content remotely is a necessary feature, as content is king. It's, the use case for XR is all about the content and applications like virtual speech.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask you a very transparent question now, because it's something that we are sometimes asked as software providers, and I'm sure you are asked this multiple times a day. What's the difference between something like Quest for Business and Arbor?
Yeah, there's a few things in particular. I mean, we can go into all sorts of detail on this question, but just at a high level, the few things that I'll touch on is one, just the price point. I mean, it's over 2 times as expensive, if not more, actually, in education. One of the things too is it's a very limited feature set. We've been doing this for quite a long time, and the feature set available on Quest for Business it's lacking quite a bit. We're seeing customers. I mean, we're at AWE right now. Had multiple conversations with customers yesterday saying, "Yeah, we tried this Quest for Business, didn't work. Coming over to you guys." But one of the more compelling things is I think close to 80% of our customers are actually using more than one type of device. Quest for Business only works for Quest devices, so it's a non-starter for 4/5 of our customer base just right there by itself. So again, happy to, if anyone is super interested in seeing maybe a matrix grid of features and that sort of thing, I'm happy to go into that, share that resource with you later. But
great, thank you. I feel that's helpful for people to know. Okay, so you launched the project about a year ago, you said, Louise. So how many students have been impacted in that time, do you think?
Well, we're targeting about 600 schools, mostly in technical and vocational education, and it comes to about 150,000 students that have been using XR for the past year.
Wow, that's amazing. And how long does the project last for currently?
Currently, up until June or August officially of 2025.
Okay. And what has the response been from various stakeholders? So the response from teachers, students, parents?
Well, overall, the response is great. I mean, everyone's excited to try new things, to try new technology. The students mostly know XR from gaming at home or at arcades, for example. So for them, it's a fun way to learn, and we see that teachers sometimes they need a bit convincing at the beginning because they also associate VR sometimes with gaming. But we see a shift in that teachers are really getting to see the possibilities of using XR for training. And in the beginning, we also noticed that some teachers, they were a bit hesitant because they weren't familiar with the technology. They were a bit scared to use it in front of the students. But we've been training them for about a year now in using the headsets, the software. So I can say that they now are confident in using the technology, and they're very excited. As I mentioned earlier as well, sometimes they just need to experience themselves to believe it, and to have a software or applications that is context bound is essential there. But overall, response is really great. There's a lot of excitement, and it just keeps growing.
Brilliant. And I'm sure all of us on this call can relate to people thinking that VR is just for gaming, and it being a bit of a hesitation for them to realise that it's so much more than that. A common thing that we find sometimes with our customers is around they've got their hardware, the software, the MDM, they're all set up and ready to go. But we find that they often need to work a bit more in terms of like marketing it to the people it's available to and driving that excitement as well to make sure that people A, know it's available, and B, aren't hesitant to put on a headset, for example, just because it's something new. How have you overcome that barrier, whether that's with the teachers or if the teachers have had that with students?
Well, we've been organizing a lot of events, a lot of trainings to basically get everyone to put on a headset and experience it themselves. And usually after a few seconds, they're convinced of what is possible. And it's really important that they see what's possible in their field. And I think we were able to succeed with that. And during all the events, the response is overall great. Everyone is excited. And people keep coming back, and I regularly get emails, I get phone calls, people talk to me when they see me at an event or something, and the response is just excitement, and they want to know what's coming, what software are we negotiating with, things like that. So it's all positive, really.
Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, I think the key thing is getting people in headsets, and then once they're in headsets, they do want to come back. Okay, so we're all proud to have played a part in this project, and thank you for involving virtual speech, Louise, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of Rob and Jordan there as well. So what's one key thing, this is a question for everyone, what's one key thing that you've learned from using VR in education? And that can be as part of this rollout or with other educational customers. Rob, I will come to you first.
Oh, it's me. All right. Okay, good. Thanks. I think one thing that I've learned is that education is a very complex puzzle. I mean, there were already a couple of mentions here about this. It's about the content, the hardware, the MDM, classroom management, storage, possibly logistics. And it also means listening a little bit into the fears about privacy, the student acceptance, or also the teacher or educator acceptance, and even cost and so on. So, and what I've learned from a lot of education projects is that actually it's a very individual topic. So what works in Belgium does not necessarily work in Berlin. And even what works in Berlin doesn't work in the same country in Bavaria, for example. So we need to be kind of mindful of that and try to help our partners, the schools, the school districts, and so on, to make it as easy as possible. And for me, I personally think that it's not only about finding the right content for the right purpose. There is actually quite a lot of content out there, as Louise really knows. But educators might not have the time to look into 5 chemistry apps. They might have their own way to explain things which are not like Food to Class explains it, and they want to do their own thing. So one of the things that I think is very important to drive this is to empower educators to easily create their own content in their own way as well. And that's why also I'm a big fan of no-code VR creation platforms, and I'm always happy to recommend some. And I think those kind of things, if a teacher, if an educator can build their own things, that will unlock the full potential of VR in education.
And that might also help with the engagement of teachers as well.
Yeah.
Jordan, what's one thing that you've learned for the
I think
sector?
Absolutely. I think for me, what I hate seeing is schools buying a few dozen headsets and then they just sit on a shelf. And I think that's happened a little bit too often, in my opinion. And I think one of the main reasons that this happens is there's not really an XR champion like Louise, a part of the organization, who's really saying, I'm going to own this thing. We're going to figure out all the problems. We're going to figure out how to increase adoption and get teachers and students how to use these devices. But I think the same goes for the right content providers like Virtual Speech, who are willing to have a collaborative approach in helping schools actually adopt this technology and not just purchase the technology. And so when you're thinking about, well, which XR content providers should I partner with, that actually is a really important piece, in our opinion, in finding creators and even OEMs like Pico is certainly, in our experience, very collaborative in helping you figure out, connecting you with the right partners and solutions and ensuring that you're having long-term success. So to me, that's certainly one of the things that I've seen, and something that I would suggest others consider when they're thinking about which partners to go with in developing their XR program.
Yeah, that's good advice, definitely. Louise, what's something that you've learned with this project?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Rob and Jordan said. I think from my point of view in our project, it's important to have an intermediate partner such as RTC in this case, that has close contacts with industry, but also with the government, with software developers, with hardware developers, with education systems, with schools, because we are involved in all of those, so we can see what's going on in the industry, what companies are developing, and we can easily identify opportunities for schools. We can also bring them in contact with companies that are already using VR for a long time. When we started out, we had a few partner companies that were already using VR for a couple of years to train their employees, and to be able to spot those opportunities to transfer it to schools, which can also benefit from the same trainings as companies do. And we are a neutral organization. Everything that we do is free for the schools, so we can easily research for them. We can spot opportunities, transfer to the schools. We can bring them in contact with education. So I think to have a partner like that in other countries, for example, I'm sure they have similar organizations as we are. To have some organization like that to really roll out the project, to structurally and sustainably implement XR is essential.
Yeah, to help navigate the space and bring it all together.
Exactly. Yeah.
Final question from me, then we will move on to audience questions, because we have had a lot of audience questions. So for whoever wants to take this one, or you all can, What are you most excited about for the future of VR learning? So obviously you've all got extensive experience here, but in different areas, so you might have different opinions or the same. So I'd be interested to know.
I'll go first on this one. I think for me, the data is clear at this point. I think VR training and education, it's more efficient. There's better retention rates. And we're just seeing use cases again and again and again with these same types of results. So to me, that's no longer the question. The question now is, okay, how do we now take that and actually integrate it into the existing VR, or integrate VR into the existing curriculum of a school or university or whoever. And so I think about things like LMS integration and how are we helping educators implement VR into their current way of tracking and grading students and those types of things, which in some ways that's here, but I still think there's a gap of kind of where it needs to be for schools to see more broader adoption. But that's what I'm excited to hopefully be a part of, building solutions like that as well.
Yeah, I think integration's a big thing that we're seeing a lot of at the moment.
Yeah.
Rob, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, maybe I don't. I mean, building up on that and also extending a little bit. I think I'm super excited right now that there is actually VR is already winning in education. Everywhere in Europe, we see large tenders for education. Belgium, obviously, but also Spain, Italy, France, Germany, Poland, Czech Republic. There's so much going on, and it feels like the governments who are sponsoring organizations like yours at RTC, for example, they have now really started to understand the huge value of this technology and the potential it has to revolutionize education. So I'm super excited to be part of that, but I'm also mindful that, as Jordan said, there's still a couple of things that we need to figure out along the way, grading and LMS and so on. So, but the first steps are fantastic.
Mm. And Louise, what are you most excited about, or what would you like to see in the future?
Well, teachers right now are, like Rob said, they are experimenting a little bit with no-code platforms or low-code platforms. So I'm very excited to see what they will create themselves. For example, we're also providing 360-degree cameras. So schools are starting out using those as well to create their own content. And I'm very excited to see what they will create themselves and will share amongst other teachers, so that we can have a library of our own with content that was created by teachers, because they are experts in their fields, so they know what could be useful for other teachers in the same fields. So I'm excited to see what they will create themselves, but also the impact of AI in all of those platforms, to see what will be possible in a couple of years with the help of AI, to help create themselves content, but also in existing content. I think there's a lot of benefits in using AI there as well.
Yeah, couldn't agree more there. I think, as you've probably seen with virtual speech, we've integrated generative AI over a year ago now, actually, in that, like, even in that short time of a year, like the version we have now compared to a year ago is leaps and bounds ahead. So I'm also excited to see where that might go, obviously from virtual speech's point of view, but just the market in general, because talking about like creation tools for teachers, like, will they one day be able to just like quickly prompt a whole environment for themselves? Like, I feel like that comment is not going to age well, and that's probably going to come out in 3 months' time, and I'm going to sound like a right dinosaur. But okay, great. So we'll go on to some questions now. This isn't actually a question, but a nice comment. VR has gone around a few times in my career, but this is the first time it has really been taken up by enterprise. Education is a great way to make use of learning how to do something without breaking anything. Thank you. Good comment. A user from YouTube has asked, I have a question regarding accessibility. How can I be sure that XR technologies are accessible to all students, including those with disabilities or limited access to technology?
I might take a
I
quick.
think, yeah, go ahead, Jordan.
Well, yeah, of course, I want your feedback. I mean, this is your show for sure, Louise. But we work with Stanford and Eric Brown from Stanford. This is a big part of what they focus on, which is inclusivity in VR. And what they found and what they're seeing is VR is not just for the gamers. It's not just for the tech enthusiasts. It's for the storytellers, the filmmakers, the creatives. And that is one of the primary objectives of their XR initiative is how can we make this accessible and inclusive for everyone? And what they're seeing is VR bridges the gap in a lot of ways in allowing these types of students to get into VR and enjoy what they're doing. I can't speak specifically on kind of the disability side of things, but I will say this: when we started our VR arcade 8 years ago, one of our very first customers was actually a woman in a wheelchair who was paralyzed from the waist down, and she was trying on VR and doing some things that, of course, she would never be able to do in real life. And just her facial expressions after she had taken off the headset and experienced some of these things that she'd never been able to experience before. I mean, it was amazing for us to see and experience that. And VR, of course, has these capabilities for those types of use cases.
Yeah, VR can definitely really open up the world to people. Just a comment I'll quickly make in terms of accessibilities. Something that I would recommend is having a non-VR option as well for that small percentage of people who can't use VR or don't want to use VR for whatever reason. Obviously, with most of what everybody's building, VR is the optimum method, but you don't want to exclude anybody who can't access that. So that's my 2 cents there. Louise, Rob, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Jordan said. We also have one of the benefits of working with an organization like RTC, if I may say so, is that we are accessible for all schools. So that also includes schools with special needs students. And I regularly get feedback from them as well that they have been using our headsets. We have a lot of applications available that are suitable for those students as well. And it's very nice to see that they are also using them. So I get a lot of feedback from them as well. Regarding access to technology, again, everything that we do is free. So schools have free access to the hardware, to the software, to the trainings. So everyone gets the same opportunities there.
Great, thank you. On to our next question. So Dr. Oliveira has said, Dear Louise, congratulations for the implementation of an impressive project. How are you managing the upskilling of teachers, the internet connection in each device, and so on? Can you talk a little about your learning journey in the rollout of the project?
Well, we're not doing this alone, of course. We also work with some universities. Together, they represent XR Academy. And they are providing, together with us, they are providing training for teachers. We have been doing that for the past year in multiple rounds. So we started with basic training for IT coordinators. We have been doing that for 2 months. And then we started with basic training for teachers. So XR Academy, they visited each school to train the teachers in working with the headsets, working with everything regarding the MDM solution, ArborXR, but also the troubles that they might find along the way, such as the Wi-Fi connection, things like that. So we covered that. And if they run into problems, they can reach out to us and we help them out. Thanks to Arbor, we're mostly able to do that remotely. So they just call or email and we're able to solve most problems. Oftentimes, I also visit schools to see how they're doing, to help them out with something that they might struggle with. So they get a lot a lot of support from the RTCs, but also from XR Academy and the other partners in the project to help them out the best way we can and to support them the best way we can. We also have a Wi-Fi router that is available in each set of devices. So we have boxes that consist of 4 headsets, an iPad, and a Wi-Fi router. So that way, in most schools, everything goes smoothly. And if not, they reach out and we help them to get things set up.
Great, thank you. What evidence or feedback do you have regarding the impact of XR on student engagement and learning outcomes? So what have you found that experience to be, Louise? And then perhaps I can talk a bit more about the stats behind it.
Yeah, well, it mostly, what we see mostly agrees with the existing research of using XR in education, so better retention. Things like procedural trainings are better when using a VR headset, for example. But we also have one of the project partners, again, are a couple of colleges and universities who have been doing research for the past year. So they have been interviewing schools, but also other partners in the project. And they will publish their report, I think, in September. So end of August, begin September. So then we will really have something to show regarding the feedback that and evidence that we've been gathering for the past year.
Looking forward to it. And just in terms of research that we've done at Virtual Speech, so we found that a big thing that we focus on is not just upskilling, but the confidence to actually carry out those skills as well. And 86% of our learners felt more confident after using Virtual Speech, and that's a whole age range from high school up to like partner level at a company. 95% said that practicing in VR was better than practicing on their own. 92% said their skills improved. PwC have done studies about the effectiveness of VR for learning, that learners are 4 times more focused and 4 times faster to train. And I think the standout stat, well, there's 2 standout stats I would say that I often refer to, is that it's not just for people who don't know how to do any of these skills. So a big thing that we do is around public speaking, and it's not just for people who are terrified of public speaking, for example. It's also for people who would consider themselves proficient because they will learn different things than somebody who's brand new, for example. So 92% of our learners who described themselves as proficient or expert still said that they could improve by learning with VR because they get that feedback element still. And one of the companies that we work with did a study that showed that learners improved their skills by up to 25% in just 10 minutes. So you can only imagine the reduction in time, the cost saving from the training itself, and then also the time out of work and so on. So there's some statistics for you.
Yeah, and I think also something that we also highlight with our teachers is that VR is just another tool to train, and it's not a substitution of training in real life. It's just something that you can do additionally to the training in real life. So sometimes teachers think, well, are we only gonna train welding in VR now? Of course not. It's just an additional tool. You still have to do it in real life too.
Yeah, and teachers won't be replaced. It's very much to complement their existing methods. We have a fan of ArborXR who said, Arbor is still the best way to manage a Pico device, and most others, to be honest. Thank you very much, LinkedIn user.
Yeah. Agree more.
How are schools using virtual speech, and what outcomes have you seen in users who have undergone training with virtual speech compared to traditional training methods? So the risk of sounding conceited, I will hand that over to you, Louise, to talk about your experience.
Well, our schools are very excited about using virtual speech because it provides a safe learning environment. They're able to learn, for example, with the AI avatar in virtual speech, they're able to train with handling difficult conversations, for example, but they also train public speaking, of course, and it helps helps them to create a safe environment to learn. And I think that's very important because as was mentioned before, sometimes students are nervous when they have to present or have to speak, and to have a software that is available for them to learn that in a safe way, to keep practicing. Doesn't matter if they make mistakes, they can just learn from it without being ridiculed from their friends or things like that. It provides a safe way to learn, and I think that's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And they can practice directly at the point of need. So they don't have to, like, say, have a class on public speaking or presenting and then don't actually present for 6 months. They can actually just pick up a headset the day before, the week before, whenever they want to. So that's a big benefit of something like presentation skills training as well. So we have a YouTube user who has asked, how did you decide on the different software you ended up using? What were the main criteria when making the decision?
Well, I can't share the exact criteria, of course. That wouldn't be fair to future partnerships, but some things that are important for us is that it has some relevance to the learning goals in Flanders. So it has to be something that is incorporated in the learning goals, so something that students really have to practice or really have to learn. We do a lot of testing. It takes hours of testing to see the quality of the application, of course, the amount of content that is available, the types of content that are available. And we just do a lot of testing, and we use our list of criteria. But also budget is a big thing for us as well. As we are a nonprofit and we work for the government, our budgets are unfortunately quite limited. So we really have to rely on partners who are willing to work with our budget, and we're very happy that most of them were able to help us out with that as well.
Mm-hmm. Finton has asked, are there off-the-shelf VR apps for secondary schools? Now, Finton, if you've not come across virtual speech, there's one for you. So we can help with all things communication training, so public speaking, job interviews, they tend to be our two biggest ones for secondary schools. But Rob, do you have any other suggestions for off-the-shelf VR apps?
A lot of them, actually. So there is actually a large library available that you can just start using. And so if you want to know more, I mean, it would be too much to just list all of them. So just reach out. We can help.
Okay.
And I'll say too on that, we on our website, arborxr.com/directory, and we have a list of a number of different IS application developers in education, secondary or otherwise, that you can look at. And then even kind of following up on the previous question, we're obviously not a school, but one of the things, again, that I would highly encourage educators to consider when they're thinking about their content selection is who's actually going to help me have long-term success? Who's a partner with me in the long term, right? And we at Arbor, and we work with over 300 content creators, we're starting to identify which content creators are really good at marketing and promotion and which ones are actually good at being a long-term partner. And so we're happy to advise in those types of conversations as well, if interested.
Great, thank you. And we'll be putting everybody's contact details up at the end as well. So I'm sure any one of us will be happy to discuss that with you. Dr. Oliveira is back. I experienced a strong lack of interest from Gen Z to engage with headsets and VR if this is not embedded and part of the teaching modules. On the other side, the educators do not want to make the usage part of their modules. What is your experience to overcome this dilemma? Good question.
Well, like I said earlier, you just have to experience it yourself to get convinced of the possibilities and the benefits. And I think we were able to succeed in most cases. Of course, there's always some teachers who are hesitant, but mainly when they see their colleagues working with the VR headsets and they hear the students talking about how nice the class before was because they were using VR for certain things. teachers get triggered as well, because they see the excitement and the enthusiasm from their students. They talk with their colleagues as well, of course, and it's just something that keeps growing within the school. One teacher is an early adopter and starts with it, but it gets spread out throughout the school, and we see that's something that we see as well, because when we started out, we asked each school who was going to be our main contact, and they started doing it in the school and slowly engaging their colleagues as well. They were using VR during the lunch break, so their colleagues could see it, and eventually everyone at some point is like, I'm wondering what he's doing with the headset. Maybe I want to see it for myself as well. And then they get on the headset, and it goes automatically practically after that as well.
Just maybe also just from my side, I think Louise has mentioned this a couple of times now, getting your hands on a headset, also even Gen Z, all the gens actually, just playing around a little bit, feeling the headset. That's very important, because if you just see it from the outside, it might be like, that person is doing something weird, or I don't know what that person is doing, but experiencing it makes all the difference. And there are some really cool apps out there which you can just put on and you have a little bit of fun, but you also notice, okay, this is how I could use it and benefit of it. And just getting your hands on things is probably the best way. If you're interested in that, we can also arrange some bits. And on the other hand, I mean, this is a bottom-up approach, and then there's also a top-down approach, especially when it's about grading, when it's about integrating this into the curriculum. Then there's also a lot of policies which have to be put in place also from the governments and so on. So we have to tackle it a little bit from both sides, I'd say.
This might be related to what you were just mentioning, Rob. So Finton says, bureaucracy in the education sector here in Ireland stifles implementation of new training technologies. Do you have any tips with how to handle bureaucracy?
Well, I think that's one for Louise. She is at the source of that. From our side, we are always happy to help. So this is the thing. We are happy to help. We are happy to connect to people. We are happy to give examples from other countries and to facilitate things. But Louise, you might know a little bit better.
Yeah, you just need someone in the team that takes on a leading role, I would say, and of course every government is different. In Flanders, we really strive for innovation and technology. We really invest in that, so it goes very smoothly for us. Regarding XR, of course, there's other subjects too, but I won't get into that as well.
Virtual speech requires interactions voice with the avatars. How is the setup of classes? Are they in groups of students in the same room? So that's a good question in terms of like the practical implementation. So Louise, I'll come to you in a minute to see how you do it. But just speaking from our other customers' experiences, they'll either all be in the same room, yes. The headsets have become much more advanced to be able to cope with background noise, I would say. Certainly a few years ago, it'd be very difficult to focus on what one person's saying because it would pick up on what everyone else was saying. But we find that's not actually a problem now. So, for example, we'll be at trade shows and there'll be hundreds of people, and I'm sure we all know how loud trade show floors can be. And that's absolutely fine. As a backup, we do have headsets and microphones so that they can help to block out some of that noise. But then we do also have some people, whether that's higher education or enterprises, where people will use it in smaller groups or as standalone. So they'll take the headset home with them in a library style system. Louise, how do you run that with your schools?
Well, every school decides for themselves, of course, but I see a lot of similarities with what you just said. I think most of our schools work with groups, so they have a couple of students that are doing VR, a couple of students that are doing something else, but basically, yeah, the teacher decides themselves. But I think that working in a group is the most common way that our schools have been doing this.
Okay, thank you. Have you noticed any differences in how students interact socially when using XR compared to traditional methods?
I think that students share more when they talk a lot about what they did in VR, for example, and they learn from each other that way too. We also know that some of the schools are casting the device on a bigger screen, and then they discuss what's going on with the whole classroom. So yeah, definitely, I think VR could be a social activity as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good point, because I think people assume it's very isolating, but actually if you cast the screen, you can do multiplayer VR, it can actually increase that social interactivity. We are out of time, so if we didn't get round to your question, we will reply on, well, I will reply on LinkedIn. If not, we will have our contact details up on the screen in a minute, but the moment you have all been waiting for, let's move on to the giveaway. So huge thanks again to Pico for providing a Neo 3 Pro headset for a lucky member of our audience. Now, I don't actually know how this is going to work. I think, oh, here we go. Great. So we'll effectively roll a dice and a name will pop up and you will be the winner. Oh, I feel like I'm Britain's Got Talent. Alan Lloyd, you are the lucky winner. So Alan Lloyd, who is tuning in on YouTube, please pop your email address in here, or we will reach out to you, or contact me on sophie@virtualspeech.co.uk. I will pop my email in the chat. And yeah, we will get that shipped out to you. Thank you very much. So thank you everybody for joining us today, and especially to our guests for sharing your experiences. I know all of your time is very valuable. If anyone would like to contact any of this month's guests, their details are on the screen in a minute. There we go. There's some details for you. And I'm sure we're all happy to connect on LinkedIn as well. Next month's webinar, we are shaking it up a bit and we'll focus specifically on what skills you can learn in VR with the world-renowned TED speaker, Julian Treasure. So I'm really excited about that. In the meantime, thanks again and have a lovely day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.